All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving deep into some seriously juicy history.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is. It is. We're time traveling back to 1859, the year Darwin dropped his bombshell on the origin of species.
The book that shook the world. Literally.
But here's the twist. We're not just rehashing the science, the survival of the fittest, and all that jazz.
Nope, we're going deeper.
We're going to dig into the immediate reactions. How do people actually respond to Darwin's theory back then?
Ooh, primary sources. I love it.
You and me both. We've got this awesome academic paper that analyzes early reviews of On the Origin of Species. It's like peeking into people's minds right as this revolutionary idea explodes onto the scene.
It's going to be like stepping into a time machine.
Exactly. Now, to set the stage, Darwin's book wasn't the first to suggest that species, change over time.
Right, the idea of evolution had been floating around for a while.
But Darwin, and of course, got to give props to Alfred Russel Wallace, too.
Absolutely, can't forget Wallace.
They both came up with this mind-blowing concept, natural selection.
The idea that nature itself is selecting which traits get passed down.
Leading to, you guessed it, the evolution of species over generations.
And this, my friend, is where things get really spicy.
Oh, yeah. Because Darwin's book, let's be honest, it wasn't exactly a beach read.
Dense,
Yeah.
scientifically rigorous, definitely intended for a very specific audience.
Scientists, scholars, the brainy folks. But get this, the book sold out instantly.
People were hungry for these ideas.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how much of what we think we know about Darwin is actually filtered through the reactions of others?
Not just the science itself, but how it was received, how it made people feel.
Exactly. So by diving into these early reviews, we're getting a raw, unfiltered glimpse of Darwin's impact.
And trust me, these reactions were all over the map.
Oh, I bet.
Imagine a spectrum. On one end, you've got the diehard Darwin fans, the cheerleaders.
Waving those Team Evolution banners.
And on the other end, the staunch opponents, those who just couldn't wrap their heads around it.
And then, of course, all the shades of gray in between.
The hesitant, the curious, the ones trying to reconcile these new ideas with their existing beliefs. It's a microcosm of how society wrestles with, really big, challenging ideas.
Love that. So let's kick things off with a champion of Darwin's ideas, a true fanboy, if you will.
Ah, you must be talking about Thomas Huxley.
The one and only. Huxley, the biologist, the brilliant mind, often called Darwin's bulldog.
And for good reason. He was a fierce defender of Darwin's theory.
He famously said, and I love this quote, "Those who want to judge the book should read it."
Mic drop. It was a challenge to all those critics who dismissed Darwin without actually grappling with his work.
A call to engage with the ideas, not just react emotionally.
Exactly. But of course, not everyone took Huxley's advice.
Oh, I'm sure. So who do we have on the other side of the ring, the anti-Darwin crew?
Well, one prominent figure was Louis Agassiz,
Agassiz, remind me.
a big-deal scientist at Harvard, highly respected in his field, and he completely rejected Darwin's theory,
Just flat out said, nope, not buying it.
pretty much. Claimed it wasn't supported by the facts. It just shows how divisive this whole thing was.
People were forced to confront some deeply held beliefs, and that's never easy.
No kidding. And nowhere was this clash more explosive than in the arena of science versus religion.
Ah, the age-old battle.
Right. Many saw Darwin's theory as a direct assault on the idea of divine creation.
Which, for many back then, was a core belief.
Absolutely fundamental. A guy named Francis Bowen, a philosopher, he saw Darwin's theory as deeply unsettling, even dangerous.
Dangerous. Why?
He thought it undermined the very foundations of faith, the whole idea of a creator God.
It's fascinating how this one book sparked such a fundamental question.
The question of how science and religion can coexist. How do we reconcile scientific discoveries with our spiritual beliefs?
And that question, my friend, is still relevant today. It's not just a 19th century problem.
Not at all. Darwin's theory challenged this long-held belief that humans were special, uniquely created in God's image.
It forced people to reconsider humanity's place in the grand scheme of things.
Not the center of the universe anymore, but part of this vast, interconnected web of life.
Right. And that's a pretty radical shift in perspective. No wonder it sparked such strong reactions.
Think about it. This idea that we're connected to all other life forms, that we share a common ancestor.
It challenged the very notion of human exceptionalism.
And for some, that was deeply unsettling. A guy named William Carpenter, a physiologist, he really struggled with this.
He couldn't stomach the idea of humans being related to, well, what were considered lower life forms back then.
That's like Darwin drew a line in the sand.
Team Darwin, Team Anti-Darwin.
Exactly. Henry Fawcett, an economist, he actually pointed this out in his review. He said Darwin's book had created these two distinct camps.
The Darwinites and the anti-Darwinites.
He even named names, like he was picking teams for some grand intellectual showdown.
I love that. But amidst all this heated debate, surely there were some folks trying to find a middle ground.
Oh, absolutely. Not everyone fell neatly into one camp or the other.
So who do we have in the maybe, maybe not corner?
Well, there's this fascinating guy, Asa Gray, a botanist, really renowned in his field.
What was his take?
Gray is a great example of someone who embraced nuance. He was a supporter of evolution, but he was also a devout Christian.
So he was trying to bridge the gap between science and faith.
Exactly. He didn't just reject one or the other. He sought ways to reconcile Darwin's ideas with his religious beliefs.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most interesting perspectives lie in the gray areas.
Not the black and white, the for or against, but the how can we make sense of this complexity?
And speaking of complexity, we can't wrap up this first part without mentioning the legendary showdown between Bishop Wilberforce and, you guessed it, Thomas Huxley.
The great debate. It was epic.
Picture this. A packed hall, tensions running high, and these two intellectual titans clashing over, what else? The implications of humans being related to apes.
Oh, man. This debate was more than just a scientific disagreement. It was a cultural clash, a symbol of the upheaval Darwin had unleashed.
And here's where things get really wild. The paper we're looking at actually compares Darwin to the creator of a new religion, with natural selection as its central dogma.
It's a bold analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it highlights just how influential Darwin became.
More than just a scientist, he became a symbol, an icon.
And that, my friend, is why these early reactions are so valuable. They offer us a glimpse into how Darwin's ideas challenged, inspired, and ultimately transformed our understanding of, well, everything.
Our place in the universe, the nature of life itself, heady stuff.
Absolutely. But we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack, so many more fascinating reactions to explore.
You know what that means.
We gotta dive deeper.
You know, it's funny, even among those who are like, okay, yeah, evolution makes sense, there were still so many different interpretations of what Darwin was actually saying.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just a simple yes or no to evolution.
Right. It was more like, okay, but how exactly does this whole thing work?
Exactly. And one of the most debated parts of Darwin's theory was this idea of the struggle for existence.
Oh, yeah, that's a heavy one. The idea that competition for resources drives natural selection.
Leading to the survival of the fittest.
Right, which, let's be honest, is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but can be kind of tricky to pin down.
Oh, for sure. Back then, there was a ton of disagreement about what that even meant.
Like, what does fittest actually mean in this context? Strongest, smartest, luckiest?
All good questions. And even Darwin himself wasn't always super clear on how to define it.
Which, of course, just added fuel to the fire.
Totally. People could interpret it in all sorts of ways, some of which strayed pretty far from what Darwin intended.
Speaking of straying, we can't forget the folks who were just straight up horrified by Darwin's ideas, especially the religious implications.
Oh yeah, that was a huge part of the reaction.
Yeah.
For many, it just seemed like Darwin was kicking the legs out from under their whole worldview.
I mean, imagine believing your whole life that humans were specially created by God, and then this book comes along and says, nope, we're just another twig on the evolutionary tree.
Talk about an existential crisis.
Right, and some reviewers really struggled with that. There's this guy, Andrew Murray, a naturalist, who wrote about how Darwin's ideas were repugnant to the most cherished sentiments and hopes of man. Heavy stuff.
Wow, yeah, repugnant is a strong word. It really shows how much this wasn't just about scientific debate. It was about values, beliefs, the meaning of life itself.
Exactly. And it's easy to forget how deeply ingrained those beliefs were in Victorian society. Even some who are open to evolution still really struggle to reconcile it with their faith.
It's a tension that, honestly, we still see today. How do we fit these big scientific discoveries into our personal belief systems? It's not an easy question to answer.
Nope, not at all. But back in 1859, those answers must have felt even more elusive. Imagine picking up on the origin of species and having your whole world turned upside down.
Right. It's no wonder people had such strong reactions. You've got everything from scathing critiques to hesitant endorsements, attempts to reconcile the seemingly irreconcilable, and even some outright ridicule.
It's like a whole spectrum of human thought and emotion all swirling around this one revolutionary idea.
And what's amazing is how many of those reactions still resonate today. We're still grappling with the same big questions. What does it mean to be human? What's our connection to the natural world? Where do we fit into the grand scheme of things?
It's like Darwin handed us this amazing tool for understanding life, but it also forced us to look in the mirror and ask some really tough questions about ourselves.
And that's what makes exploring these early reactions so fascinating. It's not just about history. It's about understanding how we, as humans, make sense of these big, world-changing ideas.
And how those ideas continue to shape our understanding of who we are and where we came from.
Absolutely. So, what can we learn from all this? I think it reminds us that science isn't just about cold, hard facts. It's a human endeavor, shaped by our values, our beliefs, and our hopes and fears.
It's like science gives us the raw materials, but then we, as a society, have to figure out how to build something meaningful with them.
Exactly. And that's a process that's always ongoing, always evolving, just like life itself.
Which, of course, brings us back to Darwin.
Right. He may not have had all the answers, but he definitely kicked off a conversation that's still going strong today.
You know, it's kind of amazing how these reactions from back in 1859, they're like echoes of conversations we're still having today.
Right. Like that whole tension between, what science tells us and what we believe deep down.
Yeah, and where humans fit into this whole grand evolutionary story. It's like Darwin threw this massive wrench into our understanding of ourselves.
Totally. It's like he handed us this incredible tool for understanding the natural world, but it also made us, turn that tool inward and examine our own place in it all.
And these early reviews, they really capture that struggle. It's like you can almost feel people wrestling with these new ideas, trying to fit them into their existing worldview.
It's like trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole sometimes.
Exactly. And remember that analogy we talked about, comparing Darwin to the creator of a new religion.
Oh, yeah, with natural selection as its, central dogma.
Right. It might seem a little out there, but it really highlights how powerful and influential Darwin's ideas became.
Because it wasn't just about, the science itself. It was about how that science reshaped our understanding of, everything. Our place in the universe, our relationship to all other life forms, the meaning of life itself.
Heavy stuff. And it's interesting how Darwin himself becomes this, larger-than-life figure in all of this.
Oh, yeah. He's like the central character in this grand drama. Even when the reviews aren't directly about him, he's always there, looming in the background.
It's like he became this symbol, this icon of this massive shift in thinking.
And that speaks volumes about the impact he had, an impact that we're still feeling today.
So after this incredible deep dive into, all these different reactions to Darwin, what's the big takeaway for our listeners? What should they be mulling over as they go about their day?
Well, I think one of the key insights here is that, Darwin's work really revealed this fundamental clash between scientific thought and deeply held beliefs.
Right, and that clash, it's not something that just went away.
Nope, it's still shaping how we understand the world and our place in it.
It's like Darwin tossed this pebble into the pond and the ripples are still spreading out.
Exactly. Which leads us to a final thought-provoking question for our listeners.
Hit us with it.
Knowing what we know now about evolution, all the evidence that's been gathered since Darwin's time, how would those early reactions look different today? Would we still see the same debates raging on, or would we have found some kind of common ground?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure. How do we, reconcile new knowledge with old beliefs? How do we navigate the ever-changing relationship between science and, being human?
It's an ongoing journey, but I think by looking back at how those who came before us grappled with these big questions, we can gain some valuable insights for our own journey.
Totally. So that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Darwin and the reactions to his groundbreaking work. We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Thanks for joining us on this adventure through history. It's been a blast.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.